Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Kenton David Bell, and welcome to Soul Food and Fuel for Your Life. I'm really trying to make a point of recording podcasts more often. But what's been happening is manifestations have been taking place so powerfully and so quickly in my life that I just haven't had the time to sit down and do the recording. And that brings me to the first segment of today's podcast. And it's about time itself. You know, over the years, I've worked with time quite a bit. And when I say work with time, what I mean by that is my experience, my relationship to time has changed dramatically in the last 20 years. I would say some of my very first experiences where I've began to notice that time is not a constant. It's not something that is outside of us. It literally flows through us. Many people have the idea their relationship to time is something that is an energy outside of them, as opposed to an energy that literally flows through them. And because of this, many people have what I would call an adversarial experience with time. Now, people who've known me, not just all my life, but people have known me maybe for, let's say, a number of years. Maybe I've been working with them as a client or, in some sort of relationship, a friend or a lover. When you, when you begin to hear the stories of my life, most think it's almost impossible for somebody like me to live the few or many years that I have lived with so many experiences. And it's true when I look at my life. It's been almost as if I've had maybe 3 or 4 different lifetimes in this one life. That is 3 or 4 lifetimes of experiences. You know, I was born in California, raised in Hawaii. That was a wonderful experience. I've lived up and down the West Coast. I've lived in Alaska. I was a king crab fisherman. Some of my fondest memories is when I was 12 years old, my mother took my brother and I to West Africa. And we had some most incredible experiences. And the stories just go on. My life looks reads like an adventure book, really. You know, one thing after another. I left home at 15. I was an actual drug dealer living on the beach in California in a beautiful house. At 15, at 17, I went up to Alaska, lived up there for 7 years. I've done almost everything that I've set out to do. And somehow I've had these experiences in these blocks of time that when you start to really think about it on one level, it just doesn't make sense that I've done all of these things. Now, after living in Asia for a while the last time, that was back in the 90s, I became very ill. And after my illness, or during my illness, I should say, is when I had my spontaneous Kundalini awakening. And that's when Thoth began to come and speak to me often and started teaching me how to work with the chakras and, move energy and actually start to move through time in a different way. Now, most of us look at time as that clock on the wall that measures it. I'll tell you, I had the experience often in the past, and I say in the past because I don't have an analog clock on my wall any longer. But in my home offices for years, I would have an analog clock on my wall with a second hand, and I'd be in session. And during session, I would watch that second hand sometimes. Boy, I swear to God, it would not move sometimes for what seemed like a full minute. And then it would start again. And I've also had other occasions with that second hand. It would go real slow, be stopped for a long time, and then all of a sudden go real fast to catch up, it seemed. Now, most of the time when I'm in session working with a client, which is most of the time over the phone, we're in a place that is outside of time and space as we know it in the third dimension. And ever since 2012, we really have left the third dimension of time, of linear time. Another way to look at it is we've left kind of an analog experience of time and moved more into a digital experience of time. Now, I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've had the experiences that I'm about to tell you. And this was in the early 2000s. I was living in Northern California, Bodega Bay more specifically. And I was deep in my awakening process. There was a lot of Kundalini energy moving through me at the time. Some days it would leave me somewhat incapacitated. It was so strong. When you have a strong Kundalini experience, sometimes the energy it kind of fries the circuits when the voltage goes up. So you can feel kind of wiped out for a couple days at a time, or even sometimes weeks. So I started having this experience. I drive from Bodega Bay to, let's say, SFO, the San Francisco airport. And there's generally that's about a 2-hour trip. You give yourself about 2 hours for that. And you're giving a little time for traffic there as well. I started having the experience that no matter when I left, whether I gave myself 2 hours, an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes, sometimes an hour and 15 minutes, and I knew I was going to be late, I would arrive exactly on the dot that I had anticipated, down to the minute that I had anticipated in my mind. Now, I started to notice this, and I thought this was kind of a very bizarre happening. One of the pieces that I want to add to that is, in each of those cases, in that part of my experience in Bodega Bay, there was not another person in the car with me. So it was just me and my own experience of time, I would say. There was not another influence that, let's say, didn't believe that time was malleable. It was very glued to the tick-tock, linear, analog fashion of time. And I noticed that when I was by myself, and still to this day, that I'm able to move through time in a very different way than most of us are familiar with. Take, for instance, this was an experiment I started doing about 7 years ago. So I would be scheduled for sessions in the morning, and sessions that, my work. And I would be down to about 3 to 5 minutes before the session. So I'd play this game with me, kind of like an experiment game. And at the time, I was living in a 3-bedroom house, I would say it was about 2,200 square feet. It was smallish. It was 1 story, pretty straightforward house, nothing really strange about it. And I got it down to where I could clean the whole house, which included vacuuming, mopping, doing the dishes, that is putting them in the dishwasher, tidying up everything. Now, mind you, it wasn't a deep clean, but clean the toilets, clean the bathroom, all within 3 minutes to 5 minutes at the most before I had a session. So I had to get it done in that specific amount of time because I had to be on the phone. And it worked every single time. Now, Even today, I could take an hour and do the same amount of work in an hour, no more, no less, than it would take me 3 to 5 minutes. So I wonder, when we really start thinking about it, how much time are we wasting? How much time is just floating by without our awareness? Or even more so, what is your own personal relationship with time? If you ask most people, you'll find it's somewhat adversarial. They feel as though there's not enough time usually in the day. Or maybe they feel like there's too much time. Your relationship to time, you would be best advised to bring it into you. Time flows through you. It is not something that is outside of you. Time is malleable. Play with it a little bit. Do a little experiment like, okay, I'm going to drive from here to here, like a 4 or 5 hour drive. Pick the time, the minute that you want to arrive. And then go ahead and try it and see how close you get to it. I played this game with an old girlfriend of mine for about a year. And we would drive back and forth between Central and Northern California, about 4.5 hour drive. And almost every single time we would play the game and guess the minute we would arrive. And there would be traffic some days a lot less traffic, maybe, a crash and, backed up traffic. But at whatever was going on, we would arrive exactly to the minute that we had guessed. It was a lot of fun. Now, when I'm clear and in my alignment with my passion, and we're talking about time here, I can make things happen so incredibly rapidly. It's almost unbelievable. A couple of times in my life, I've started a business. Just recently, this last week again, a new business. I'll go into that at some other point. But in both cases, both these businesses were started within a 24-hour period. Within 72 hours, these businesses that nobody had heard of were getting new clients. I hadn't put the word out yet even. They were both in the kind of entertainment field, you would say. And one was in Cambodia and one was here where I am living in Sedona. But it's amazing when you come into an alignment with your passion and you're in your alignment with time and space, you're able to create and manifest in very powerful, very quick, like lightning quick ways. Not only that, but what you start to manifest is so in alignment with what your soul's desire is that it brings this incredible sense of satisfaction. Now, we are in a time of great change. Time itself, our relationship to time, has changed. It's prophesied by the Mayans and others that the year 2012 would be the end of time as we know it. And that is true. That is what's happened. Most people's brains and awarenesses are still wired to the linear time. But in fact, we are not operating in that bandwidth of time, relationship, thought around it. And I know this sounds pretty bizarre, but don't take my word for it. I ask you to play with this idea a little bit. One of the things I would recommend would be in a quiet meditative space, ask yourself to align with time. Ask yourself deeply and be honest with yourself. What is your relationship to time itself? And bring time into, own the fact that time flows through you. Make it your ally, not an adversary. And as you do this, you'll start to notice, if you ask, that there's a lot more time. a lot more space for things in your day. Now, there's also another component to this. And this gets really out there, woo-woo metaphysical stuff. And I'm not the only one having these experiences, I know. And many of my clients are, and I'm assuming there's many out there who are also. So as the planet is shifting, we're coming out of the old program. Time itself is speeding up. We need to readjust our relationship to time in our physical bodies, as well as our minds and our consciousness, and how we move through our day. Structure, while important to an extent, is no longer as important as it used to be. As a matter of fact, you might find that old schedules just don't work the way they used to. And it feels very rigid and clunky. And in fact, let's call it inspiration, or the genius that's in all of us actually is moving us out of that structured mindset in order for us to have these new experiences where we can manifest our dreams and desires that our soul came here to do in a very quick, rapid way. And now there's also where it gets even more bizarre. And in time, there are also parallel timelines running through each and every one of us. We live in a multiverse, not a universe. There are aspects of you living many, 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 many different lifetimes, somewhat similar, some very different, in slightly different time, space-time realities. And we're in the process right now as we're coming out of the old program that's been around for about 13,000 years. And it goes all the way back to Egypt. As we're coming out of that program, we are gathering these aspects of self that are having their own experiences separate from the one that we're sitting in this exact moment. I've had many experiences, and I'm going to go into some of this. And once again, can you prove this? Difficult to prove. You know it through the experience, through the direct experience when it's happening. And I would think I would almost be insane, except for I notice people around me are also having similar experiences. So for instance, maybe right here in your life present, you are maybe not so happy. Maybe you're not happy with your job. Maybe you're not happy in your relationship. Maybe there's another part of you just literally just an octave, a vibrational octave away in a slightly different time-space zone that is having an incredible life, that you actually have the opportunity to begin to merge with, to bring back these aspects of self and to complete yourself in a greater wholeness than you are currently in. Now, the truth is we are multidimensional beings, and energy and time flow a particular way in the third dimension than they do in the fourth or even the fifth dimension. In the fifth dimension, time is very different and much more malleable with one's attitude, consciousness, and choice, I find. And I'm not going to say exactly all the attributes because, well, quite frankly, I'm still learning them myself. And I don't want to influence those of you out there if you're going to start playing and having experiments in time and space. I think it's important that you go about it in a way that is fresh and relates particularly to you. And I would love to hear feedback from some of you, and the good ones that feel like it's in alignment with the audience, my audience, we might even have on the podcast here and interview some of their stuff, their stories. So as we enter into this new age of energy. The frequencies of the planet have changed. We are moving through the fourth dimension currently and into the fifth dimension. Different people respond differently to the dimensional energies. Different people feel more comfortable, depending on what their soul program is, living in different dimensional energies as well. So, for instance, the third, fifth, seventh dimensional energies are what we call individuated states. This is where you put the needs of the one before the needs of the many. In the second, fourth, sixth dimension is what we call collective energies. And this is where you put the needs of the many before the needs of the one. And each one has its own set of physics. As a matter of fact, I do a lot of work with people in the astral body, which is a fourth dimensional aspect in all of us. And the astral gets really tricky at times. There's a lot of stuff in there. Usually there's past life traumas, earlier this lifetime traumas and wounds and hurts and what have you, and memories. And if there's something significant that has happened through time, meaning past lives, in this case, what most would call past lives, I don't really think of them as past lives as much as parallel lives, because time is happening all at once, truly. But we get these energies are stored in the astral body. And it's usually these energies that are caught in the time, in past time, that have wounds or patterns that we're still repeating lifetime after lifetime. Sometimes there's themes that repeat through many lifetimes. In more and more ways, I see these as parallel experiences, especially when you begin to work with the oversoul and bringing these timelines into a resonance with each other. And while it gets to where it's hard for the human mind to comprehend it, but I would say we begin to collapse the timelines onto each other, and we become more whole in that way. Or if we don't, we're stuck in many alternate universes simultaneously that's occurred over time, as we've really over the last 13,000 years, a lot of it, while we've forgotten who we really are. And so now we are in what we call the Great Shift or the Great Awakening. And as our whole solar system is arcing back towards the center of the galaxy, we begin to remember and remind ourselves of our true nature, which is also an aspect that deals with time very differently than it has over the last 13,000 years. Things start to speed up quite a bit. Everybody's noticing this. As a matter of fact, when things start to speed up and you're not keeping up, it literally creates a lot of distress within the physical body, within the mental and emotional body. It's not possible to go forward into these new frequencies that has a lot to do with time itself, time and space, and vibration, with a bunch of old baggage. And a lot of people are feeling this. You can see people in our world, if we just look in our own country, the United States of America, the divisions that we have right now. For instance, and I'm not saying this in any political way, the MAGA movement, which Make America Great Again. In those words, that statement says that we have to go back because things aren't good now. Well, it's not just because we're in a great shift right now, and that's been an idea for a long time. Remember when the Beatles were kind of evil and, that was scary devil type music. Now we listen to the Beatles and it's about the most loving, precious, iconic music that's ever been created here on the planet. And that's, that idea has taken place over time. We're back in a particular time like that. We always are, really. But sometimes it gets sped up a little bit faster. And we're in one of those right now. We see all these earth changes happening. Weather patterns getting much more intense. We see the political divide, big part of that. Tools, people moving forward and people hanging on to the past. And once again, it's not necessarily political. It's a mindset. And some people will choose to shuffle off the mortal coil rather than change. That's what's going on. And actually, the more fear there is, the more we're held back. The less fear we have, the more we are able to move forward into this new time-space continuum. As you get older, it gets a little bit more difficult to move through this. I'm 59 years old now. A young 59, but 59. And I see the younger people are much more capable of moving in a new way. It's a new agility. It's a time for a lot of agility, flexibility, and knowing that your life is very malleable. Wherever you feel a lot of resistance or rigidity, hanging on to old ideas, it's no longer the time for that. As a matter of fact, your ideas can actually slow down time itself. So here's an idea for a little experiment. If you're willing to try this, it's a real easy one. Take a moment in the morning. Sit in your quiet place, meditative place, in your big comfy chair, like I have, and close your eyes for a few moments and ask yourself truthfully, what is your relationship to time right now? Ask your soul's wisdom to be present with you. If you ask your soul's wisdom to be with you and you are asking in earnest, it will show up. And ask your soul's wisdom what maybe you can learn or know or grok about time that's going to serve you better. And then you might want to try an experiment like the one I mentioned earlier, where how much can you get done in 3 minutes, 5 minutes? I use the example often of a high-powered CEO. I use, for instance, Tim Cook from Apple. Okay, I don't know him. It's just I arbitrarily picked that name partly because it's the most valued company right now. And then you have a beautiful, housewife that lives in the Midwest, 2 or 3 kids, husband who goes to work, makes a good living, and she chooses to be a housewife, take care of the house, take care of the family that way. And for a moment, we're going to pretend we're not in a pandemic as I'm talking about this. And they both have equal amount of time. Let's say their day is 12 hours. Tim Cook is running this company. How does he manage his time? How does he manage to squeeze in all he does into that 12-hour day? How does he feel at the end of that 12-hour day? Take the housewife then, who is, a wonderful person, educated, but she chooses to be a housewife because that's what makes her feel best. That's what works best for her and her family. And she takes care of the house. She goes shopping, takes the kids to school, picks them up, prepares the meals, takes care of all the other little stuff going on that needs to be taken care of in a day-to-day life in a family. Now, at the end of the day, one has maybe accomplished some other big things, like the CEO has made some huge decisions that could be, billions of dollars affected by those decisions. And you have the housewife who, maybe it's a few $100s, $1,000, depending on her household budget. And look at these two different, and I'm not saying one is better than the other. That's not what we're saying here. But just think about the difference of these two and how their approach to time and their ability to get things done in a particular measure of time can be very different. As a matter of fact, there's a saying, it takes more energy to play the small game than it does to play the big game. And what that means is when we are not really in alignment with our soul's destiny, our soul's expression, that we are holding ourselves back. We're literally holding ourselves back in time. And it takes more energy. It almost is like we're moving through a thicker environment with almost like a molassesy environment, it could feel at times. For instance, somebody like Tim Cook, he probably only sleeps often 4 hours a night. I don't know if that's true or not, but I know many CEOs who sleep, for weeks or months on end, only 4 hours a night, and they have tons of energy all day. And they're able to make decisions, choices, and move through time and have great effectiveness with it. Of course, the housewife has great effect in her life too. But we want you to look at what's possible there. And I'm not even saying one is right or one isn't, but just sit and compare the two within yourself and think about it. Think about how a high-powered CEO's relationship to time affects him and his world, his life. Think about how the housewife's time, her relationship to time, affects her life. Think about a child who doesn't think about time really, except for, I remember when I was a child, it seemed to go on forever, didn't it? Most of us had that experience. Like, when is this day going to end? When will school end? Oh my God. Until it was bedtime, then it's like, oh, wait a minute, I don't want to go to bed. Time slow down. And now as we get older, as I'm 59, I look at time and do I think that there's more than enough time? Well, I actually do believe there's more than enough because of my relationship to it. But I am also astutely aware that time is the most precious resource that I have. And my guess, it's also the most precious resource you have. And how much do we really think about it? How much do we really value that resource? How often are we in an adversarial relationship with that? Think about it. Now, one can learn to manifest extremely, extremely quickly if you're truly aligned to that and you are allowing that which you're asking for into your space as well. And once again, as I said, I have had these experiences where I've created brand new businesses literally one day, and within 24, 48 hours, have new clients, and I haven't even advertised or anything. And I'm talking some big projects, like entertainment projects, film projects, things of this nature. In Cambodia, I started a talent agency years ago, and within 3 days, I had a Khmer partner. 3 days, we had a movie deal come in. And I don't even know how they heard about us. But you see, when you start moving through time and space and you're in your alignment with your soul's destiny and your source, everything starts to come together very, very quickly. As a matter of fact, so quickly, it's almost, you have to start training yourself to keep up with it. There's never been a better time on the planet than now to strike out on your own and begin to create your own life based on your own values, your own beliefs. There's never been a time. And the more you're in alignment with that, and this is the important part, with the aspect of time flowing through you, your soul aligned with you, that's very important, being guided by your soul, not your mind, not a psychological thing, but your soul. And I talk about going to the vertical journey. This is where we go to the vertical journey and time becomes no time or now time. It's not a tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock experience any longer. But when you come into this alignment and your field is fairly clear, you're able to manifest very, very quickly. As a matter of fact, I think we're getting to the point where some people will start to be able to manifest out of thin air. One of my teachers and gurus was Sai Baba, who was known for manifesting things right out of thin air with his hand. A lot of stories about that. This will be a conversation that continues on my podcast as we weave other components into deliberate creation and manifestation. This has been another episode of Soul Food and Fuel for Your Life. I am your host, Kenton David Bell. And for those who are interested in working directly with me and manifesting powerfully in your life, give me a call, 928-274-2026, or send me an email, kentondavidbell@gmail.com, and I look forward to our next episode together. And if you have any thoughts or questions, please email me. I look for responses to this feedback. I'm very curious to hear what your experiences are in the adventures of time and space. Until next time, aloha.